Sabres Live is presented by Seneca Resorts and Casinos. Nothing else comes close.
We are going to overtime.
Nice to be back with a little Sabres Live Overtime, Marty. And, you know, the off season allows us the chance to breathe and also reflect, especially for you, having been a player and risen through the ranks, to sit back and think of those who've had an influence on you and your path through the career.
Oh, absolutely. And some of those names from when I was drafted in 95, I mean, I was on stage with, obviously, John Muckler was a GM, but Don Luce, Larry Carriere. And then my first season at 18, getting called up, and Teddy Nolan was coaching, but on the bench was Don Lever and Terry Martin. And there was so many of those Sabres alumni that helped us, our generation, to learn and navigate through the ups and downs. And T was one of those guys. So I am so excited for the opportunity to spend the time to talk about his path and his career. So it's great.
A lot of memories for Terry Martin along the way. And when you're serious about the game, bet on Buffalo with the only sports books in Western New York. Seneca Resorts and Casinos. Betting counters are open daily, and self-service betting kiosks are available 24/7 at all three locations. Whether you visit Seneca Niagara, Allegheny, or Buffalo Creek, the Sports Lounge features the latest lines and multiple screens so you never miss a play. The Sportsbook at Seneca Resorts and Casinos, where the love of the game meets the thrill of the win. Now, Terry Martin. Terry, it is great to see you, and we must start with congratulations on your first Stanley Cup. What is that feeling like?
Well, Duffer, I got to be honest, it's a little overwhelming. I tell everybody I've been chasing that thing for 47 years, and I finally got one. As we all know, that thing's not easy to win, and as you get older, you find out really how difficult it is to win.
So, I mean, you're obviously a scout with the Colorado Avalanche, and you have your Buffalo connection. We'll get to that in a minute. But who were you impressed with in that run? Like, I mean, there's so many big names, but is there one of them that you were so impressed with that you have to single that person out?
Well, there's two people, in my opinion. Obviously, Cale Makar. And when we picked up Lehkonen from Montreal, he was a big piece. You know, he's that Swiss Army knife that can go in any situation, play with anybody, and he scored some big goals for us.
What was on your report when you watched Montreal? Were you the one that got that trade done? Were you the one that says, "Hey, listen, this is the guy we got to get"?
Listen, Marty, you always take credit for that, but seriously, no. Garth Joy, who's one of our pro scouts, he lives in Ottawa, so he sees Ottawa and Montreal just like I see Buffalo and Toronto all the time.
Okay.
So Garth was really the guy that was really pushing for Lehkonen at the trade deadline.
Did you have a really good feeling, and maybe a different feeling this year, Terry, going into the playoff run, just based on how everything had been going for the Avalanche?
Well, I got to be honest with you. I knew we had a good team, but when I really look back, and I've asked this question to a lot of people on our management team, I felt last year's team was a deeper team. And I've asked that question to Joe and Chris McFarland, and they said, yeah, you know what, maybe we were up front, but we were better on defense this year. You know, when we picked up Josh Manson, and you know, that was a big addition for us. So, you know, we had some failures, as everybody knows, in the previous 3 years. We got bumped in the second round, but last year's team and this year's team were two pretty good teams.
So how many years is that with the Colorado Avalanche for you?
Marty, believe it or not, it's 16 years I've been with Colorado.
16 years. So you've dealt with different GMs, different coaches. How does this group differs from, you know, past experiences? Working with Joe Sakic, I mean, he was always one of my favorites growing up in Quebec City. And Jared Bednar, believe it or not, I played with Jared Bednar in Rochester for a short time. Like, all I remember about him was his hair. He had the long hair. But how does your interaction with those guys, how does it change from past, front office?
Well, first of all, Marty, I remember that because I still was with the Sabres when you and Bednar were down in Rochester. As far as Joe Sakic, the calming influence, as we all know, just a world-class individual. And Jared's sort of the same demeanor, although, you know what, from what I understand, you know, I'm not in the dressing room, obviously, but I guess he can put the hammer down when it needs to be put down. But, you know, he's a player's coach, and they all love playing for him.
What led you to Colorado after your final season with Buffalo in 05-06? Was there a connection there within their organization that allowed you, presented this opportunity for you?
Well, I knew Brad's Motor City Smitty quite well. You know, I didn't play with Brad with the Maple Leafs, but I knew him obviously, and Garth I knew a little bit, and I just felt it was time to get out of Buffalo, and you know, the opportunity presented itself, and so I moved on.
What's that world like? If you decide to make a switch, do you start making tons of phone calls to people you know? Are you going through interviews? Like, I only know from playing, right? You either are a free agent and your agent takes care of it, or you get traded. Like, did you have somebody helping you with the transition, or is it just you at your office and making the phone calls?
Marty, you being an ex-player, you should know better. That's what you call tampering.
Well, it's not tampering if you're not working for anybody, you know.
Yeah,
but
I was still under contract with Buffalo at the particular time.
Okay, so you worked yourself a nice little secondary gig. Let's just put it that way.
Statute of limitations is passed, Terry. We're all good. Hey, is there a player though that you were involved significantly, in your opinion, in the acquisition, you know, onto Colorado?
Well, I think the one that comes to mind is Kadri, myself. When we had traded Matt Duchene, and I forget what year it was, I think it was 2017-18.
Mm-hmm.
I believe we played San Jose Sharks in the second round that year. And we took them to game 7. And the first period, Nathan McKinnon hurt his shoulder. And we had nobody that could move up from a second line to a first line. We really didn't even have a second line center. And so after the season was over, you know, obviously we talk all the time. And I just said, we need to get somebody in a situation like this that if Mac gets hurt, can move up. And, you know, Kadri got into trouble in the playoffs, as well documented. And he had a fantastic contract at the time, a fantastic contract. So it was like a glove for me. And so we made the deal for Naz, and obviously it worked out well for both sides.
Well, you talk about a fantastic contract. How much does that weigh into your reports when you watch in pro games? Because very different, the pro scouts to the amateur scouts. The amateur scouts, they don't have to deal with contracts. It's just looking at the young kids coming in for the draft, or, you know, you sign free agent college players or whatnot. But for you, in your report, when you watch the pro game, how does the contract factored into, you know, your notes at the end of the day when you submitted them into your GM?
Well, obviously, in the back of your mind, you always got, you know, what the guy makes, and you're wondering if you can fit it into your salary cap. But ultimately, we just put our reports in, and that's the upper management to try to figure that stuff out.
Are you still doing paper and pens, or do you have a computer? Because we just saw a great clip of Jason Spezza at the Helinka tournaments, where he's got the notepads and he's writing notes, and he's like new into the business. He's noting everything. So do you pen and paper or computer?
Well, when you go to the game, it's pad and paper, and I did happen to see that about Jason on the computer last night. It was sort of comical, but like the reporter said at the time, you know, this is all new to Jason, so you got to get to know the players. So you're jotting down little notes as the game goes on, and then when you get home, whether it's that night or the next morning, you file your report.
Terry, what's life like for you in a normal season? Forget about COVID and stuff like that. We're hoping that's behind us. And for the majority of your career, we haven't been dealing with a pandemic. How many games are you going to? How often are you filing these reports? And how often are you in, you know, maybe larger meetings with the hockey operations department for your team?
Well, I usually see, without COVID, I usually see probably anywhere from 120 to 150 games a year. Um, with COVID, obviously we did a lot of video scouting. So you go to your games, you file your reports. As far as my job, I got a lot of the East Coast here, both the AHL and the NHL. So you know, it just seems to flow somehow.
So
And
obviously you watch a lot more NHL games, Terry, but like, do you get requests sometimes like, hey, we need you to go see this player in the AHL or this specific teams because a trade could be imminent? Is there that request sometimes too?
Oh, absolutely, Marty. And I can go back all the way when I was with Buffalo with you. I remember getting a phone call from John Muckler. Get up to Portland, Maine. I want you to see JP Dumont play, because he was with the Islanders at that particular time, and it was one of those ones. I still remember to this day. I was driving back from Syracuse. It was a Friday night, and I get home and I got a message. You got to get up to Portland, Maine tomorrow to watch JP play. So it's all good, but I must admit, as you get a little bit older, the traveling gets a little more difficult.
Well, I was going to save this to the end, but are you contemplating retirement now that you have a Stanley Cup?
Well, I'm planning on slowing down. Let's just put it that way, Duffer. I got, life's short, as we all know, and want to spend some time with my wife and my daughter and my granddogs.
The grand dog's very important. You gotta take care of them for sure. I want to bring this up because I don't want to forget, and I have it on my mind right now. So I think it was last year, or the year before, we're talking about you to Rob Ray. And I said, remember Razor when Teddy Nolan was on the bench with Don Lever and Terry Martin? And Razor goes, Terry was never a coach in Buffalo. I'm like, yes, Terry was an assistant coach in Buffalo. I remember I got called up that year as an 18-year-old and he was on the bench. Razor didn't remember that. I mean, he took a few punches to the head, but after transitioning from, behind the bench to the scouting and the development side, did you miss being back on the bench?
Well, first of all, let's get back to Razor. My first year in Rochester was 89-90, and that was Razor's second year in Rochester with us. So obviously I've known Razor a long time, and he's taken a few punches to the head, as we all know. But I was assistant coach that 1 year with the Sabres. Transition, Marty, I got to be honest with you. I always felt that was my forte, anyways, was evaluating talent and out in the field. So I had zero issues moving from coaching to the scouting department.
But why did you move to coaching immediately after your playing days? I mean, there was no gap at all. You went from playing in the AHL to right behind the bench with Toronto in the OHL.
Well, it was an opportunity, Duffer. I'd always thought about it, when I was winding down my career, what it would be like. So, I was offered the Toronto Marley job in the OHL back in 87, 88, I believe. I coached there 2 years, and then a funny story here, and I owe a lot of debt to my good friend Don Luce, because he was obviously the head scout for the Sabres at the time. And I was just doing a little research last night. So in 89, 90, which was my first year in Rochester, the Sabres were turning a lot of first-year players pro that year. And John Van Boxer he was just strictly the coach. They had no assistant coach. So they were, and I'll name some of these players off to you that they turned pro that year: Donald Odette, Darren Shannon, Bobby Corco, Kenny Sutton, Darcy Lowen, Joel Savage, Brad Miller, Dave Littman. So there was a lot of young kids that needed after practice work. So that was one of the reasons why I got hired, was certainly Don Luce had pushed me towards Jerry Meehan, who was the general manager at the time. So everything worked out very well. And I must admit, Marty, you played there. My 6 years in Rochester were probably 6 of the best years of my life there. We had great teams. Not good teams. We had great teams. We went to the Calder Cup finals 3 out of the 6 years. Unfortunately, we lost all 3 of them.
You had,
Yeah. And then they won it the year that you went to Buffalo. They won the Calder Cup in 95, 96. You were up in Buffalo.
That is correct. John Tortorella was the coach.
Torts was the coach, and they had Steve Shields in net, and Dane Jackson, and all the guys there. Greg Sharon, Sharkey was there. But you talked about guys. I mean, Donald Odette, what a character in the game. And I remember playing with him twice in Buffalo when I first came up, and then he came back later in his career a second time for a playoff run. But guys in Rochester, you coach Jody Gage and Scotty Metcalf, and you talk about Razor. Any of those guys like characters of the game that, you know, you go to a golf tournament and you just have stories to tell about certain players?
Well, the best story I've got with Donald, and Donald, when he came from the Quebec Junior League, believe it or not, Donald Odette, the goal scorer that he had gone 10 straight games without a goal. So on the 11th game, I grabbed his stick. I said, "Give me your stick." "What do you mean, give me your stick?" I said, "Give me your stick." So I put two little eyes by the blade and the shaft. He scored 5 goals that night. He went on to win the Rookie of the Year. And every time he was in a little bit of a slump, he said, "Here, give me. Here's my stick. Put the eyes on
it." So is that the single best advice or hand that you lent to a player as a coach?
Well, I also gave Donald a little bit of other advice. As we all know, Donald used to like to score goals. Yeah. He didn't like his own end so much. So when he was with the Atlanta Thrashers back in the day, you know, he could score goals and didn't have to back check. And he signed a free agent contract with Dallas Stars. And I said, "Donald, why are you signing that contract with Dallas?" "Well, what do you mean? What do you mean?" I said, "Well, now you're going to have to back check with Ken Hitchcock." So to this day, every time I see Donald, he says, I know. I should have taken your advice."
Donald would always say, and Razor always says, "Donald Odette, what did I do? What I did?" Every time he came back to the bench, and coaches would be like saying, "Donald, like, what I did?" Like that was always his go-to line. Like he just pretended he didn't understand what the coach was saying just because of the English-French barrier, but he knew exactly what they wanted to do. He just didn't want to do it.
Oh, that's you've got Donald down to a T. But I'll tell you what, he was one great little goal scorer. I'll tell you, man, he could score goals.
Hey, Terry, I'm not surprised that one of the first names of Sabre alum and obviously, you know, people that have stayed and become a big part of this community. You know, one of the first names you brought up was Don Luce. I am curious to know your relationship with Don Lever, John Van Boxmeer, and others that are from that era. Obviously, you talked to coming into Rochester and coaching with Van Boxmeer, and we all know that John, longtime scout in the organization. Donnie Lever, you then were working with behind the bench, and I feel like I've seen you with him as much as I've seen you with anybody in the course of your careers. So how do you talk about, you know, what do you say about these guys and some of the others that you've been so close with?
Well, obviously they were two great coaches and two great individuals. And I don't see Boxy as much anymore because he lives out on the West Coast in LA. I see Donnie all the time because Donnie does virtually the same job that I do with the Chicago Blackhawks. So I see Donnie quite a bit. Not so much in the summer anymore because he doesn't golf with us. He's got family commitments with I think he's got 7 grandkids now. So I don't see him as much, but they helped me a lot along the way.
The one thing I remember, my first training camp was before the 95-96 season. And I don't know if it was you or Donnie, but one of you two said, "Oh, you French guys, all we need for you is a Pepsi, a Joe Louis, and Player's cigarette." Like that's, and I think it was you that used to say that. Like the people that don't know, the Joe Louis, it's like a dessert kind of like cup, not cupcake, but a little cake thing or whatever. So you used to say, "French guys, we need to teach you how to play hockey and get rid of the Pepsi, the Joe Louis, and the Player's cigarette." That's I still remember that. That's in 1995.
Yeah, well, Marty, you know, coming from Quebec, you'd go up to the old Montreal Forum and everybody be drinking Pepsi, smoking a cigarette, and eating Joe Louis or one of those tasty hot dogs they had at the Forum.
Yeah, definitely. We had a few of them at the draft. So those were good.
We did. We
I brought you
absolutely
one,
did.
Duffer. I went
I
down
know.
and fetched a few hot dogs.
Hey, I was Terry, when you look back at your time with the Sabres, more so, I would say in the coaching, but also the scouting and director of pro scouting, it's kind of a fascinating window of time. Like when you took that position, when you had your season on the bench with Ted Nolan, but then you became a member of the scouting department and oversaw the pro side of it. But you're talking about teams that went to the Final Four, the finals, and then bankruptcy, and then coming out of it to launch into what we always talk about is 05-06 and what became of that. How do you look back at that period of time?
Well, Duffer, as you well know, time flies, and the seasons pass so quickly. But we had some good teams here. We had some very good teams. We had some challenging times, obviously, when we were going through bankruptcy. But the '99 when we went to the finals there and no goal, everybody knows about that. Who knows if we could have won that game and got it to a game 7? Because from what I understand right now, Dallas was pretty banged up. And listen, I'm going to take my chances all day long with Dominic Hasek in net in a game 7. And then when we got beat by Carolina with all our injuries there, we had a chance to maybe win that year too. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be, but we had some good teams here. We had some real good teams here.
Really good teams. We had Jerry Fortin on the pod. He's the director of amateur scouting with the Sabres. We asked him, is there one player that you wished you guys had selected in a draft? And he pointed out to Charlie McAvoy right away. That was the Alex Nylander draft. And he said, I wanted Charlie McAvoy, but we didn't pick him and whatnot. So your role is different in the pro scouting department, but is there one player that you guys had over the years, that is with Colorado or Buffalo, that you guys were at the table at your scout meetings or at the trade deadline, and you really pushed for and then didn't happen, and you still think, man, with that player, we would have been different?
Well, I don't like to bring up a lot of names, but you asked me the question, and this goes back with Colorado. And once again, Marty, I have nothing to do with the amateur side, so we don't sit in on those meetings. I don't know how their lists go, so forth and so on. But and I don't know what year it was, but it was David Pasternak's draft year, whatever draft year that was. We took a kid by the name of Connor Bleakley 2 picks before David Pasternak. And we didn't even end up signing Connor Bleakley. Yeah. And he ended up being a career minor leaguer. Looking back, that one probably stung.
You imagine if Colorado had Pasternak on top of McKinnon and Landeskog and Rantanen and all those guys.
I was just going to say, though, did a pretty good job landing Rantanen where he was taken. And it has paid off handsomely.
Well, let's face it, Duffer, getting Cale Makar to slide 2 was a bit of a coup here for us too. And obviously you can't forget the Matt Duchene trade that's got things rolling here. We got a bit of a nice haul with the Matt Duchene trade, but that credit all goes to Joe and Chris for putting those deals together, because as we all know, it's tough making trades in the National Hockey League. Matter of fact, I get a little chuckle out of listening to the talk show radio, and people will call in, well, why don't you trade this guy for that guy? Well, they always want the other team's best player. I want to give you their worst player. I'm saying to myself, come on, man. No, who's going to do that?
Yeah, but then the flip side now, though, is it sometimes happens because teams get in a salary cap bind, and a team like Carolina gets Max Pacioretty for free.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hey,
that happens. It's like, I mean, there was trades happening back in the days that you didn't understand, right? And obviously maybe there was money exchange or whatnot. It wasn't as publicized as it is now, but there is guys like Pacioretty, which I'm sure you've seen plenty of time as a pro scout, and pretty special player, but cap squeezes, and I'm sure you guys talk about it all the time with your meetings. When the cap squeezes you out, you got to go find cheaper players that will have a production. That's got to be a tough part of the job now, trying to find these pearls. I won't say these unicorns, Duffer, because I know you don't like the term, but these special players with low costs.
Well, Marty and Duffer, you don't have to go any further than our team last year. You know, we had to basically get rid of Burakovsky and Kadri because of our salary cap situation. Yeah. You know, Nathan McKinnon's contract's, you know, coming up here after next year, and I think we all know what he's going to be demanding. So, you know, you got to make hard decisions in today's game. You know, I'm sure Tampa Bay didn't like getting rid of all their complete third line there 2 years ago, and then have to get rid of Ryan McDonough this summer. But that's the reality of the cap world.
Chicago did that a few years back when they had to get rid of Byfuglien and everybody, but try to put it together, and you try to have people like you finding these valued contracts and players that will perform and fill in a need. But I want to go to your hockey career. I don't know, Duffer, if you allow me to make the transition, but I mean, you came in, you turned pro the year after the Sabres made it to the Cup finals against Philadelphia. So you only played 1 year with the Sabres that year, but then in 76, 77, you were full-time on the job. So how was that for you to come into Buffalo at that time where things were really clicking with the locker room and obviously with the players they had?
Well, Marty, you're absolutely correct. I got drafted that summer. And unlike the kids today, which I feel is great for the kids, you just finished your junior career off and you came right to camp. You had no introduction to any of these players. I still remember, because we always had training camp in St. Catharines. I still remember walking into the old St. Catharines Arena, and you're bumping into Gilbert Perreault, Jim Schoenfeld, Rick Martin, Randy Wilbert, the whole crew. I was so intimidated, I almost crapped my pants. And you're saying to yourself, what am I doing here? I don't belong here. And it takes a while to get over that hump. And that's what I think young kids have got an advantage now. They come to development camp, you know, for a couple of years, they get sent back to junior, and they're better prepared than we were. And it was intimidating. I must admit, it was intimidating that first year. And obviously a very, very good team.
Hey, Marty, did you know, given that we started the show and Terry acknowledged that he's been chasing the Stanley Cup for about 47 years. Did you know that he actually won a championship in his first year as a pro?
No, I did not know that.
Charlotte, baby, in the Southern Hockey League, right?
Yeah. Back in 75, 76, my first year pro, there was only 8 American Hockey League teams. So there was 16 or 18 teams back then. You know, so a lot of teams shared clubs, and in our case, Buffalo's case, Buffalo and Pittsburgh shared in Hershey, and I wasn't getting a lot of ice time in Hershey, so I got sent down to Charlotte in the Southern League, and we ended up winning the championship down there that year.
Wow, top scorer of the team that year?
No,
as a first-year pro guy coming out of the OHA, like I would have thought right there, 50 goals right away. Boom.
His numbers were decent. He's being modest here.
Hey, Marty, I like that. You said the OHA, and you're absolutely correct. Back when I played, it was the Ontario Hockey Association. Now, obviously, the Ontario Hockey League.
London Knights graduate. When you did come up the next year with Buffalo, it was about 15 games into the season, and you scored your first goal at Madison Square Garden. What do you remember about it?
I still remember we had played the night before in Springfield. I was with Hershey again, and I got the call. So I believe it or not, you know, you look back in the day, Springfield to New York City is not that far. No. I ended up flying to New York City and checking into the hotel, and it was a blur. All I remember was a rebound popped out, and I was in the slot and put it home. And everything happens so quickly now that like I'll lie in bed at night now and I'll just say, I'll think of people and I'll think of all the people that got me to where I am today. And it's overwhelming at times.
Who was in net for the Rangers in 76, 77?
Gilles Gratton.
Gilles Gratton. Hey, wait. So I have it on my mask. So was he wearing the lion mask like this back then?
Well,
or?
If he was, I wouldn't have scored because I would have been intimidated by that.
He's definitely a character of the game. We could do a whole podcast on Gilles Gratton and his beliefs and reincarnation and all of that. So, and who did you play with, when you first, when you had your first goal, but when you first got going with Buffalo, who was on your line and how did it all come together?
Well, basically, Marty, it all came together because the year before, Punch had traded Larry Carriere for Jacques Richard, and Jacques had some issues, and so Punch sent him down to Hershey. That's how I got my break. He called up. As far as who I was playing with, I have no idea. All as I know is Jerry Korov and Billy Height assisted on my first goal.
Yes.
Nice.
See, your memory is so sharp. And now I was going to do the research myself, but my guess is because you've probably kept in touch significantly with Bill over the years. Bill Height had 4 assists in that game, and I'm thinking that had to have been a career night for him.
I think that was Joe Gilbert net. No. Billy was, as we all know, Billy was a great stay-at-home defensive defenseman. But yeah, 4 assists. That's a huge night for Billy. Huge night.
But not, Marty, you're not going to believe this. And I wasn't trying to skip over it, but we were just kind of bouncing around there. Terry, can you confirm that the season prior to you scoring your first goal, you did come up for 1 game, and it was one of the more memorable games in Sabres' early franchise history?
Yes, I did come up for 1 game. It was against the Washington Capitals, and I forget the score was like
14-2.
14-2. Yeah.
For the good guys?
For the good guys.
Okay,
For the
good.
Ronnie
We wouldn't be bringing it up if it was the other way around.
Ronnie Lowe gave up 10. Rick Martin scored 4. Freddie Stanfield had 3. Danny Garrett 5 points. Lucien Perreault had 4. Yeah, it was quite a night. I just laughed when I saw that was the 1 game. Like what a moment to arrive in the NHL. I'm thinking for you.
Some pretty good players there, wasn't there?
Oh, man,
Some really, really good players. Now you're in Buffalo for 3 full seasons, really, and then 79-80 happens, and man, you picked up some miles in that season where you went Syracuse in the AHL, New Brunswick in the AHL, Quebec for 3 games in the NHL, and then you end up in Toronto. But most people would think Terry Martin, Buffalo Sabres, Toronto Maple Leafs, but 3 games in Quebec City. How did that come about? And that year, what was it like for you to just be on the go all the time?
Well, if you remember, Marty, back in 79-80, the expansion draft came in. The 4 WHA teams were merged with the National Hockey League, and every team had to lose 4 players off their roster. And unfortunately, and maybe fortunate, I was one of those guys. Lee Fogelman, he went to Edmonton. Ron Eroshenkov went to Edmonton, and David Given went to Hartford. It was a sad day for me, but I look back on it, was probably the best day of my life because I was stuck in mud here a little bit, and largely to do with they had really good teams. Like, let's be honest here. I was never going to play ahead of Rick Martin. I was never going to play ahead of Craig Ramsey. Tony McKegney came along, great goal scorer. So it gave me an opportunity to move on. So I got picked up by Quebec in the expansion draft, and I got sent to Syracuse, and then got traded to the Maple Leafs, and they sent me to New Brunswick right away. And then I got called up just before Christmas to the Maple Leafs.
Were you there for the very first NHL game in Quebec City?
No, I was not.
No, so you were down. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know I heard the story. And so my favorite player growing up was Réal Cloutier. Buddy Cloutier was I had a number 9 Buddy Cloutier jersey. And years later, they came up with these DVDs about the history of the Quebec Nordiques in the WHA and then the NHL. And Buddy Cloutier, in his all confident self said, I was a pretty good goal scorer in the WHA. I didn't know I was going to do it in the NHL. And before our first game, I got up in the room and I said, boys, I'm going to get 3 goals tonight. And I went out there and I got 3. The only problem is they lost like 6-4, but he made sure to point out he got his 3 goals in the first game in the NHL. So I didn't know if you could verify that or not, but yeah, they had a few young players on that team for sure.
Yeah, well, Michel Goulet was on
Yep.
that first year team. They had some good players, and Buddy could score. He could score.
Yeah, definitely.
Did you ever feel any sense of nostalgia that never quite happened whenever you would play against the Whalers, given that you were drafted by them in the WHA?
Not really, Duffer.
Yeah.
Because when I got drafted the Sabres, obviously, and they were called the New England Whalers back in that day. And my intention was always NHL first, so not really. But you know what? I like playing the old Hartford Arena. I still don't mind going there to scout the Wolfpack too. Hey, and Marty, were you on that Calder Cup team or Calder Cup?
We lost to Providence in 98, 99, and the 99, 2000 team. I wasn't there on that team when they lost to Hartford, but yeah,
Right,
so that was Mika Norinen. That was back-to-back years for Rochester going to the finals and not winning. But yeah, they still play the goal song in Hartford that they used to back in the Whalers days for the Hartford Wolfpack?
They've changed up, but that was a great tune. I like that tune. you probably didn't like it as much, though.
No, I didn't like it as much, although I didn't play in Hartford all that often because the Whalers were gone by the time I got in the league. It was down to Carolina and just played there maybe a handful of times against the Wolfpack, and we were really good in Rochester in my last, couple of years. So that was good. Toronto. So now you find yourself in Toronto, and I mean, the rivalry Buffalo-Toronto, although different at the time, because I don't know, they may have been in different conferences when you started in 79, 80, or it moved to the Western Conference shortly after. But how was that being in Toronto and knowing that there was that close proximity to Buffalo and that rivalry a little bit?
Well, I got to be honest here, guys. I grew up in Barrie, Ontario, which is about 50, maybe 60 miles due north of Toronto. And back when I was a kid, you only got one game a week. That was Hockey Night in Canada. And we got Toronto Maple Leafs games. So I grew up a huge, huge Maple Leaf fan. I could probably name all the players off that 67 Stanley Cup teams. Unlike you probably being in France, you were probably a Montreal Canadian fan back.
Oh, I hated them. I grew up in Nordiques fan, and so I hated Montreal. But yeah, I could name pretty much everybody on the Quebec teams in the early goings when Michel Bergeron was coaching. So kind of like you with the Leafs, probably they were my team.
So getting back to the Leafs, it was like a childhood dream, and that's really where I really started to take off and mature as a player. So I was there 4.5 years, had a lot of success there. And then I got sick one year, and then I got old, and then I went into retirement.
Well, you, as we mentioned earlier, transitioned quickly into coaching. I'm curious, given your success in Toronto, your roots in Ontario, why and when did you put down significant roots here in Western New York?
Well, Duffer, like all men, I married a great wife. She's a Buffalo girl. And listen, I got to be honest, I loved it here in Buffalo when I played here. So, when we got married, Buffalo was probably always going to be home for us. So we moved back in 85 or 86, one of those years. So we've been here ever since. People don't realize that they say, well, you scout for Colorado, why aren't you out in Colorado? I said, everything's done on computer here now. You go to your games, you file your reports on the computer and hit a button and it goes right out to Colorado.
Yeah.
So when you get up to the arena and you're scouting a game and you have Donnie Lever there and you have Rick Dudley there and you have all these guys that you played against, you played with, I like I go up to the press box, and Duffer would know. First, I go get my dinner in the press box, and I'm supposed to only be there 5 minutes, and I spend a half hour because I see everybody up there. Is it a big reunion? Is it fun to just be in that environment with these guys and just watching hockey, but more importantly, just having these conversations?
Absolutely. Marty, I think you could ask pretty well every hockey player, does he miss playing? And they'll all say, no, we don't miss playing. You miss being around the guys. That's what you enjoy. Like,
yeah,
we talked about our alumni golf tournament coming up here. Those are the things you look forward to, is seeing the guys and busting each other's chops and telling stories. That's what it's all about nowadays.
Who have you learned the most from?
Don Luce.
Really?
Don Luce, no question. You know, he was my mentor. You know, you think you know a lot when you come out of the game, and whether it's on manage, well, you have no idea as a player from management side until you get on the management side. And we just talked about salary cap, hard decisions, stuff like that. But just his overall knowledge of the game and how to scout, what to look for, so forth and so on. So there's no doubt he was the guy that taught me the most as far as scouting. I try to teach him as much as I can on the golf course, but I've quit now. I refuse to let him golf with me anymore.
Yeah, he'd be a hard one to try to teach on the golf course because he'd have too many questions. That's the one thing about Donnie, is I feel like he always asks so many questions, and you're right. Like, even for me, when getting drafted in 95 and coming to Buffalo to work out, who took care of us? It was Don and Diane. Like, we're a bunch of 18-year-olds, and it was them that really helped and shaped us and molded us into. And I remember one year in the apartment they were putting us in, the sink was leaking, and I called Don at home and I said, our sink is leaking. He goes, it's not my problem. And I'm like, well, you got to help. He goes, what are you going to do when you turn pro and you have a leaky sink in your like apartment? Like, call the apartment maintenance and get them to come up and fix it or whatnot. And so that's one of the things that he did for us that I always remember. It may be as simple as a leaky sink or whatnot, but there were so many more. When Donnie, did you leave the organization before Don, or did he leave before you?
I left, I think, a year. I think it was a year before, maybe 2 years before Donnie. But
Yeah.
The year that I left, we lost two other people, or three other people that year, I believe. We lost Ross Mahoney, or don't quote me on that one. Ross Mahoney might have left for Washington Capitals the year before, but I know Daryl Plandowski left us for Tampa Bay, and Jimmy Benning left us for Vancouver.
Vancouver, yeah.
We had a pretty good scouting staff here. You think about it: Ross Mahoney, assistant general manager; Larry Carrier, assistant general manager; Jimmy Benning, general manager; Daryl Plandowski, director of player personnel with Tampa at the time and now Arizona, and not to mention Lucy. You know,
Pretty good group.
It's a really
While you're
good
still
group.
in the game, you got to know something to stay. Yeah, I mean, your knowledge is amazing, and your obviously your ability to just transition seamlessly and work so well with others has always been on display. Marty, I have a feeling that you wanted to cap our opportunity today to speak with this Stanley Cup winner with some dis or dats.
I have to, this and that. Every time I call Terry or I see him, he's always like, look, it's this and that. There he is. So I have to, and maybe they're not accurate in the way that I may ask a question. You may have a different option. So I'll give you this, that, and the other thing. And the other thing could be whatever you want. But for example, in Buffalo, played with Gilbert Perreault. In Toronto, played with Daryl Sittler. So this or that, which one was, I don't want to say the best player or the better player, but which one had the bigger impact on your game?
Well, I think biggest impact at that particular time was, listen, I was never going to play with Rick Martin and René Aubert and Gilbert Perreault. So I had an opportunity to play with Daryl Sittler and Wolfie Paymont in Toronto.
Wow.
But there's no question Gilbert was the most talented player that I ever played with.
Okay. this and that. And look, I believe you did have punch boat in Buffalo and in no, Buffalo you were in after, right? So
No, Punch drafted me and Punch traded for me.
okay. So that's why I was going to ask, where was Punch better, in Buffalo or in Toronto, this or that?
I would say Buffalo.
I was hoping you were going to say that, because I feel like if it was going to be Toronto all the time, our fan base is going to be upset about that. Don Luce talks about how he and Tim Hortons would go and get and taste like donuts, and they like the sweets on the road. So what were you like on the road? Was it a steak and baked potato big dinner, or the sweets and the desserts, like this or that? Which one did you like best?
Obviously steak and baked potato, but listen, Don Luce has got the sweetest tooth that I know. Him and Billy Height are they're junkies when it comes to chocolate.
Well, Donnie told a story about how him and Tim Hortons would get on the road, and instead of going for dinner, they'd go and taste like all these pastries, because Tim had this idea and had this business back home that he wanted to continue to grow. And going to his house in the summertime, they'd be in the pool, and Tim Hortons would come out with freshly baked donuts to try for them to taste, so that he would have them in his restaurants, right? Like that is pretty cool. Okay. Old school rinks like the Forum, the Chicago Stadium, or this new buildings that are amazing, like Vegas, Staples, Crypto.com Arena, like these new buildings. What's better for you, old school or new school rinks?
I like the old school, because different size arena, you could build your team differently depending on the size of your rink. Where now they're pretty much all the same, so there's a lot, I don't want to say vanilla in the buildings, but back in the day, oh man, you went into the Boston Garden, man, you got beat up pretty good in the Boston Garden. And Chicago Stadium, obviously the organ and the horn, and that was intimidating. Yeah. The odd, as we all know, was unique in itself. The fans were right on top of you. The boards would slingshot you off if you got hit into the boards. And there was nothing better to go on Saturday night going to Montreal or Maple Leaf Gardens at the old Forum. I
don't know. Did you ever play as a visitor in Rochester? Did you ever have to go down in the basement to the locker room?
Sure did.
The worst stairs coming out of the locker room. Is it Chicago Stadium or the Rochester War Memorial back in the days?
Well, Rochester's, you sort of, it wasn't straight up. Like Chicago Stadium was straight up, a steep incline. Where Rochester, you sort of a couple of turns. I would have to say Chicago was tougher.
You're probably a little bit winded after you come out of the locker room to get the game started. I never got to experience that. Now I know, and I don't know with pizza in Rochester, you guys must have done some crazy stuff to the visiting team as they were coming in off the bus, and all the shenanigans of the AHL. Last but not least for me, you did, as I said, play a few games in Quebec, a few games in Edmonton, and a very few games in Minnesota. So this, that, or the other thing, the one place where you wish out of those three that could have worked out because you really like that setup, that team, or that city?
Well, obviously that would be Edmonton, because I had got picked up on the waiver draft from Edmonton the year after they had won their first Stanley Cup. So they were up and coming, and it would have been nice to stay there. Although they made a hell of a trade with Minnesota. They got Mark Napier and they got Terry Martin and Gord Shervin. I think Edmonton made out all right on that deal.
Yeah, not too bad, eh, Duffer?
It was pretty good decade for them. There's no question about that. Terry, last one for me. How do you think you've changed in your game reports now after all these years? How do you view, if at all, do you feel like you view players differently and focus on different things with them?
Yeah, you do now, because obviously there's more skill involved, obviously. So you're looking for the skill mainly now, but don't get me wrong. There's still a place in the game for some other people. And I'll give you an example. We traded for Curtis McDermott, arguably the toughest guy in the National Hockey League. He didn't get in any playoff games for us, but at our Stanley Cup parade, I made a point to go up and saying, you were a huge part of this hockey club because you got us through the regular season. And as we all know, the 82 game regular season is a grind, and you need guys that'll go out there and protect some of your players. So there's always room for one of those guys still.
Hey, what was the parade like?
The parade was unbelievable. They estimate somewhere between 400 and 500,000 people in downtown Denver. They had, I think it was 25 fire engines that, family and players and scouts and wives and management team were on top of it. It was pretty impressive.
Now, I guess I should have asked that at the start of the interview, but I'll ask you now. When you were given the opportunity to grab the cup or kiss the cup or just hug it, like, what did you do and what was that feeling like?
Well, we won it in Tampa on the Sunday night. So the team flew home on Monday. Obviously, we were all out in Denver still. We didn't go to Tampa. So we had a get together with the players at a local bar restaurant, and I hoisted it that night. And it's, things, like I keep saying, things happen so quickly. It takes a while to soak in. But it is a pretty good feeling.
That's so
I can
cool.
always tell if anybody is right-handed or left-handed, because usually if they're right-handed, the right hand goes on the small part of the cup and then the left hand grabs underneath, or the other way around. Do you remember which way you grabbed it?
Oh, I know which way I grabbed it. I grabbed it by the bowl because I'm having an issue with my arm, and I got it up there, and I told the guys before I got, make sure if my left arm starts to sink a little bit here, come and grab it. Because it's 35 and a half pounds, but it felt like 350 pounds.
Oh, I'm sure.
Was there still a dent in it when you saw it?
Yes, there was. and there was another dent a couple nights later too.
Yeah, with your boy Curtis McDermott had a little bit of a fall at the bar too. So is Nick Obicubel, right? Joining the guys in the team picture that put the first dent in it, but. Yeah. Oh my God. I'm sure there's plenty of stories about the parties, the celebrations. I just saw a video of Cale Makar in Calgary. He will take part in one of the professional golf tour events or whatever as a pro-am and whatnot. And he's talking about having a day with the cup. And, it's such a special thing for our sports, our league, but having a chance to celebrate as a team, I'm sure for you and everybody with Colorado had to be ultra special because you're all together as a group being able to celebrate your achievement.
Yes. And I'll tell you a quick story. One of the highlights for me with the Stanley Cup was on, so we won it on Sunday, Tuesday, it would have been Wednesday night. We had a get together, management and scouting staff over at Joe Sakic's house. And he had some of his neighbors there. So and obviously it's a nice, beautiful home. And I'm in one room, and the next thing I hear Daniel Perrier, who's one of our other pro scouts, he says, David Duval's here. He's got the claret jug with him. And I said, come on, David Duval is not here, and he doesn't have the claret jug with him. and you have to know Daniel Perrier. He's a very, very an avid golfer. So sure enough, we'll walk out there, and who's there but David Duval and a replica of the claret jug, because he had won the British Open in 2001.
Yeah.
So we were all getting our picture taken with the claret jug just as much as we were the Stanley Cup, because as you know, hockey players love to golf. Yeah. So, but one of the coolest pictures, they put the claret jug inside the Stanley Cup and had the picture taken. So
that's awesome.
Oh my gosh, what a perfect way to cap the year. And obviously you mentioned that you may dial it back a little bit on the man hours put in here moving forward, but the game will never leave you, as I'm sure you will never leave the game, correct?
That is correct. And I will see you guys at our alumni golf tournament on the 22nd at Park Country Club. And I will see you down at the rookie tournament on September 14th or 15th.
15th it is.
15th. So
Thank you, Terry. Congratulations once again.
thank you very much, guys.
Marty, it truly never gets old. Not only discussing the game with people who've been in it for such a long period of time, but more importantly, seeing the smile of a first-time winner.
Just the look on his face when I asked him about lifting the cup, or he said hoisting the cup, because that's what you do. You hoist the Stanley Cup. You don't lift it. And he's saying it's 35 pounds, but it felt a lot heavier. That's funny because I never did, right? And I hope one day I get to do it. So that's one thing. But also the eyes lighten up in the smile when he talks about Donald Odette and some of the other players, Don Luce, and so many more. Like these hockey memories, we could have talked to him for 3 hours and still not just scratch the surface of his memories and his time in hockey.
Absolutely. Our thanks to Terry Martin for joining us on Sabres Live Overtime. Thanks to you as well. And of course, we'll see you soon. Presented by Seneca Resorts and Casinos.